Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spanning the Need. Tonight, we're going to talk about life, ethics, and journalism in the era of claims of fake news and in the future of media. To do all that, we have my good friend, Andrea Wood, publisher and president of the Business Journal in Youngstown, Ohio. Andrea, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for asking me.
So, how are you been doing? We know that you've been around a long time in the media business. So, not many people know you've been around a long time. How did you kind of get your start?
How did I get my start? Well, long story short, my mother picked my career for me. And she did that when I was a freshman in college because she knew I loved to be in the theater in high school, and I loved politics and government and history and Abraham Lincoln. And after my freshman year in college, she picked me up to take me home, and I went to Penn State, and we had lunch, and she said she'd been thinking that perhaps the best thing I could do was go into broadcasting. At the time, women were just getting into broadcasting, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm not going to do that. Well, by my senior year, I'd realized that she was right. So I took some broadcasting classes, and when I got out of college, I applied to all the TV stations in Pennsylvania, trying to get my foot in the door, and of course, nothing happened. And so my mother said, well, why don't you take some secretarial courses and try to get in that way? So I did. I taught myself how to type. I took some shorthand courses. They didn't call it shorthand. I forget what it was called, speed writing of some kind. And I became a secretary, and eventually there was an opening at KDKA TV in Pittsburgh for a secretary. I went there, got into the sales department there, found out about television sales, and one day there was a posting for a talk show production assistant, and I applied for it, and the program director said, well, what do you want to be doing in 5 years? I said, I want to be on the air. Said, well, you can't have this job, but we'll teach you how to be on the air. So they did. So during my lunch breaks, I would go in front of the camera and fake anchor the news from scripts I'd written the night before. There was a wonderful director that coached me, and within not very long time, a guy that worked in the sales department had come from Youngstown, went back to Youngstown, called me up, said, come on up here. There's an opening for a female broadcaster. Why don't you audition? I did. I got the job. And at that time, there was affirmative action. The TV stations, regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, they had to hire women and minorities. And so there was a bounty, so to speak, for women and minorities. And I worked here for a few years. Left, went to South Bend, Indiana, worked there for a while, went back to Pittsburgh, worked there. And then I came back here because of the news director who had come here, who I'd worked with before. And he promised me that if I came here, I could do a documentary on a missing girl. And I said, a half-hour documentary on a missing girl, December 27th, I'll come. He said, okay. And we did it. And I came back. That was the deal.
You never left.
Well, no, I didn't. And my mother said, don't go back, Andrea. You'll never leave. You'll get stuck. You'll never leave. And she knew I loved the town. And I was very much intrigued by some of the stories I'd covered. And she was right. I got stuck in Ohio. I'm glad I did.
Well, and I think that brings a lot of people. They leave the area after they've either graduated or for family reasons or additional. But at the end of the day, I would say a majority come back because of family, or they love the area, or a variety of other things. So I think you made a great decision to come back.
I was raised in Pittsburgh. I wasn't raised here. I was born and raised.
Close enough. We're close enough.
Not my hometown. What can I say?
Well, and I think that brings that you love home, no matter where that is. But I think at the end of the day, an hour away from home is still an hour away from home.
Exactly. And you know, Youngstown was a little Pittsburgh in so many ways. All of it was familiar to me in the sense of industry and politics. It was very familiar to me.
Oh, Youngstown politics and Pittsburgh politics, all the same in some short fashion.
Well, more the industry and the culture.
Well, and we talk a lot about what changes people's lives from going to one area to another. So that brings you back to the area, and then we're at the Business Journal now. So in what has been the Business Journal been doing during this pandemic? Because I know a lot of people are doing a lot of different things, not their normal routines.
Let me just backtrack a little bit and tell you that we started the Business Journal in 1984. At that point, I'd been on television for about 12 years, and it had become a little too routine for me. But having said that, in the pandemic, our CEO, Jeff Leo Herman, has created new products that have helped us quite a bit. And one of them is webinars. One of them is a thought leadership series. A lot of the business services providers, professional service providers, they needed to speak to their customers about various things that have to happen during this pandemic, be it safety or insurance or how to qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program. And so we would host webinars, and that became a new revenue stream, a new product for us. So that was very helpful. You just have to keep going. We're in the news business. It's not as strong as it was. Certainly certain advertising segments have basically disappeared. Restaurants, local food. We always do a feature on local food in the summer. And restaurants right now, they don't have that extra dollar to advertise. So you have to focus on your core areas. Fortunately, we are business to business publications. So the professional services area, financial services, they are advertising and they are reaching out to the business community to tell them where to find help and so forth.
And I think that's a big resource right there, because we have a lot of businesses that are either still closed from the pandemic. They're just trying to make ends meet with just being open. Either that's carry out with no dine in, and they're looking for help.
It's bad. It's bad. Certain businesses that require face-to-face contact and hand-to-hand contact, really, it's very difficult for them. Restaurants who have to cut their capacity perhaps by 50%, and you can't make it on takeout. So it's troubling. It's troubling to me because there are a lot of businesses that I'm worried about. And we know that in the month of April, Brookings Institution just came out with a report that unemployment in the 3-county area, Mahoning, Trumbull, and Mercer County, Pennsylvania, was 20% in April. And it's now back down to like 14%, but that's just showing unemployment. It's bad. I mean, the pandemic has taken a big toll.
Now, how do those numbers range up? And this could be that, and I'm just asking a random question, is how do those numbers reflect what happened in the late 70s, early 80s with the steel mills? How big was unemployment at that time?
Oh, I would say it was up around 15%, but the problem is that the population was a lot larger then.
Mm-hmm.
We lost 50,000 steel jobs over the course of 10 years, and people fled. They left the area. So it's a much smaller community than it was.
And you have a city, it's like the city of Youngstown, that still has an infrastructure set for like 150,000 people. And they're trying to considerably shrink over the past 10, 15 years to kind of what they have now, with about, I think the last census said about 62 to 64,000 people.
Well, actually, it doesn't have an infrastructure. The infrastructure is crumbling in Youngstown if you look at it.
Yeah, because of age.
roads, the sewers, the wastewater system.
Yeah, because of age. I mean, you're without revenue coming in over those years
to rebuild it.
Yeah, that's a great point. No money to rebuild, and only enough money just to stay afloat.
Basically.
Yeah. So, and that brings up a good point is some of these things that maybe businesses don't know, or that there is certain resources out there because people don't know. So how do you kind of get the word out to say, hey, we're here to help you. We're here to make a better place for you, to give you what you need resource wise, webinar wise. How do you reach out to those businesses that don't know about the Business Journal?
That's a $64,000 question. We've been wondering that for 36 years now. Well, you just keep going at it. And I don't know what to say.
Well, it's one of those things
we can't. I mean, all we can do is provide news strategies and resources. And certainly with the digital side of our business, that's where we see the most growth now in terms of readership. In fact, we actually have a regional audience digitally. We have people reading us in Akron, Cleveland, regular readers. We also have a national audience. We have people come in who are Youngstown natives perhaps and want to read what's going on. So it's kind of a different ballgame in that regard. The print edition is a different audience, but also the same audience. Some people read the print and some people read online and some people read both.
And for the record, I'm the email guy. I get your emails.
Yeah. Well, actually, we find a lot of people reach us through Facebook and LinkedIn.
Well, and I think that brings a good point to say, hey, you are reaching out to these businesses, these local business, to give them the right resources. Because in the past, there's a lot of, I should say, bad policies, bad resources out there that contradict what either.
I don't know what you mean.
So you give all these business resources. We talk about, hey, how a business can do better in this pandemic, but then we also have people out there that are providing false narrative, fake news, as we call it. And
that's a whole nother story.
And that's where I'm going with this is we got this fake news where you guys are doing right. You guys are providing the correct information and you're doing it right for the businesses.
That doesn't mean everybody sees it that way.
Exactly.
I get a lot of feedback from people that maybe don't like what we cover sometimes.
Well, and I think I'm in the nonprofit. I've done a lot of different stuff in the community. You can never make 100% of the people happy. You can only do your best to do what's right. The
problem is that, and this going back on my career, when I first started out, news was not a profit center for television stations. News was considered public service. You covered things. You did it not because you were going to make a profit, but because it was your obligation to have a broadcast license. It changed where news became a profit center, and that all gets into the advent of 24/7 news, cable news, etc. And as cable news proliferated, it then became a narrowcasting where news became a niche, where, okay, Fox is far right, MSNBC is left. You get all this niche narrowcasting to people's political beliefs, and then you have talk radio, which used to have a fairness doctrine and an equal time rule. Those were abolished under the Reagan administration. So you couldn't have had a Rush Limbaugh going off on somebody, attacking somebody, or who else, name whoever it is, left or right. You couldn't have all of this nasty stuff that went out and name calling and just yucky conversation. Didn't happen. You had to have equal time and you had to treat people fairly. So that went away. So that made radio then became a niche for AM radio, became a niche for right-wing talk, because that's where the audience went to, that audience. And so it proliferates. So now you've got the distinction blurred between journalism, which is news, and opinion. And it's very difficult for people to see the difference between news and opinion, because you could say that Rush Limbaugh is a journalist. He's an opinion journalist, but he is a journalist. It's gotten very blurred. And along comes a president whose political catchphrase is fake news, who, this is nothing new either. I mean, this goes back to the beginning of politics, where people were saying that the news was biased. And if you go back to when Abraham Lincoln was running for office or was president, there were horrible things said about him. And each newspaper had its point of view, and it was terrible, some of the stuff that was written and said. So it's nothing new, but it's dangerous because people don't think we're telling the truth.
And I think that as times have changed, so has social media, and so has the key word that you just said that the president talks about, fake news. So how does ethics in journalism really come about with the claims of fake news come into play?
You just have to stay the course, make sure that you're checking your facts, rechecking your facts, not going with, anonymous sources and those types of things, and just have to keep going after it. Now, I think the pendulum is going to swing back because it's gotten so far. Now people, in fact, I talked to a woman today in our building about the virus, and she thinks that it's contrived for political reasons, that it's all blown up and this and that. That's conspiracy theory out there, which the president has promoted, I might add. So if you have a conspiracy theorist in the White House that thinks everything's made up, it's pretty tough to have trust in institutions. And in fact, all the institutions, trust is lacking.
Well, and I think there was a poll done, and I forget who the source of the poll was, that they said that, I think it was between 60, don't quote me on the source, but between 60 and 70% did not believe politicians and news sources. Now, that poll is probably lenient on who they're watching.
Well, there's all kinds of statistical studies that show that depending on your news sources, if you watch Fox, you don't trust any other news source. Sometimes if you watch MSNBC, you don't trust any other news. It's just gotten so crazy. It's really gotten quite crazy. And so now here we are in a pandemic. Some people don't believe it's real. And people are dying.
And I don't understand, and this is just my personal opinion, is I would have to disagree with someone if they think if the pandemic is a hoax.
Well, the president said that.
Yeah, and now he's wearing a mask. Now
one time.
Well, one time is better than none in the last 2 days. So he's 1 for 1. I don't know about today. So it all depends on what you call reliable sources, how you expect reporting from a journalist. Like you said, if you watch Fox, that's pretty much probably the only station you're going to watch.
People want to be told what they already believe.
Correct. And when you give them evidence, they're going to second guess it, which that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with second guessing second information. But when you have constant facts to say that,
you're entitled to your opinion, but not your own set of facts. And I think it's a very serious situation. I really do. Because journalists, we monitor office holders and businesses and regulators. I mean, we are the watchdogs. Granted, there's some people that act as watchdogs, and there's organizations that act as watchdogs. But if you don't have watchdogs, what do you have? And then with the social media, there's no boundaries. People can get on there and say whatever they want, and boom, just stuff goes wild. There was a story here, a local story, and I don't want to tip my hand what the story is, but it was a story that went wild on social media. And the next thing you know, it's being picked up, and it's a story we wouldn't do. We turned it down.
It's one of those stories that you think it's like coming from left field. Like what?
Well, I'll give you an example that I will speak of. There was a businessman who has an operation in Sharon and Florida and so forth. And evidently he went on a tirade at a bar and had quite a few racial slurs. Somebody filmed it, posted it. Then the press, the local press, we were bombarded by people saying, hey, this guy did this, and shouldn't you be covering it? And we turned it down. It's not something I wanted to cover, mainly because I don't think that it's just not what I want to cover.
Well, and I think that gives our viewers an understanding of what goes through minds like yourself when you decide what stories you're going to cover, or what you're going to decide, I should say, at the end of the day.
Well, I didn't feel as though it was helpful to our readers and viewers. The guy really messed up.
I think a lot of people saw that rant.
Yeah, and it did go viral, but it went viral because people that were his competitors and former employees made it go viral. So it's a story that came out of social media and so what? So what? I mean, it happened all the way out in California. The guy was on vacation. He'd had too much to drink. And it's like, I need to know that why. Now, I guarantee if we had run that story, we would have had a ton of clicks and a ton of views. And I'm quite sure that the TV station that did go big with it, they had quite a bit of views. I know one did. I don't know if, two did. I don't know if everybody did. To each his own.
Well, and people do make mistakes. No one's perfect. If you expect politicians to be perfect, you got another thing coming, because it's...
And, we're fortunate. We're a business journal. We don't have to cover everything. We don't have to get in the muck.
Well, I would, and you covered the PPP, like you talked about earlier, which is huge for the business community. People want to know that I want to keep my workers working. I'm going to need that money as a grant or a loan. So you're going to want to teach them how to get or file for the PPP. So, and that was just one of the many programs that the government had back in March. Now they're talking about another one coming out, or I think it was the CARES Act, or another one that they're looking at. Round 3 or 4 that they're looking at. So how do you guys kind of gear up for something like that when you have something coming down the pipeline that you're going to prepare for to spread to businesses?
Well, we were totally unprepared for this. As a business journal, we don't cover public health. We cover health, the business of health, but public health, a situation like this, we were totally unprepared for. And so we had to pivot to cover this, because the news viewership was just sky high. At one point, our viewership was up 500%. People really wanted the information at the very beginning. And so we were covering quite a bit of it. And what businesses were shut down. We had businesses, we put out, email us your situation, and we were constantly putting that out, who's doing what and how. So we weren't prepared. We worked long hours. We have a program called Brain Gain, which we are talking about how to develop the workforce and create a culture of entrepreneurship. So our emphasis on that, while we continued the program, we weren't able to do as much with it as we wanted to. We had an event scheduled for May, a town hall at Stambaugh Auditorium on the Brain Gain, where we were going to have a panel of students, and Congressman Ryan was going to give the keynote. He was actually going to question some of the kids. We were going to bring in middle school kids and other kids to talk about the issues that they see. We were right on track to do all of this, and then boom.
Well, and I think that comes with, as running a nonprofit, that we had an event in April. and we made the decision within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We weren't going to wait till April, middle of April. We made the decision almost like the second or third week in March. Once everything was starting to be shut down, we didn't want to take the risk. At the end of the day, there was too many unknowns. And I think that's what we're in now.
Well, and nonprofits have really been hit hard. I mean, that's a whole nother area. And I don't need to tell you that, but to your viewers, I mean, the need's never been greater, and all of the fundraisers, all of the abilities to get out and volunteer. I mean, nonprofits are really hurting now. On the bright side, we've had an awful lot of community come together to deal with that. Our foundations, the United Way.
Yeah, a lot of foundations, Weed Community Foundation and United Way, and then Youngstown Foundation. All three came together to help support our nonprofits because our nonprofits were running low on their services. And
people don't realize the nonprofit economy is a big part of the economy.
That's true. I know in Youngstown, in the Mahoning Valley, there's a lot of nonprofits that do a lot of great jobs, but right now we don't know how many are going to survive by the end of this year because of how much fundraising's down. People can't donate like they used to, but they're volunteering more hours of volunteer, but you still need money to run your programs. So that has been one of the big things there.
Well, you know, it's quite clear that this is changing life in so many ways. And we don't know where we'll be in 6 months.
Well, and I know. No,
I mean, we don't. We'll still be there. The Business Journal will still be cranking it out.
Well,
but I mean, we don't know. There's so much we don't know about this virus. And Governor DeWines came on today. I don't know if you saw that, asking people to wear masks. I wonder how successful that's going to be.
And that was one thing that I did saw. I was expecting a big announcement. I was expecting, hey, it's mandatory masks, or hey, I'm going to start shutting down. I think what he's probably, and I'm interpreting this, that he's this is his warning, saying, hey, put on a mask. Let's work together. In the back of his mind, in another week or two, if nothing comes down, he's going to say, hey, I warned you. I'm now mandatory masks, and it's going to be that now I'm shutting stuff down. I gave everyone the warnings. I
think you're probably right about that. Start out nice, ask nice, made a speech, told all the reasons why. And I think you're probably right about that. And right now, like right before this
episode, I saw a lot of people on Facebook and Twitter commenting on, well, I just wasted a half an hour of listening to Governor DeWines, or what was he really saying? So, and I think that's my interpretation. Wear a mask, or I'm going to shut stuff down, or I'm going to make it mandatory.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it was well communicated.
And I didn't support Governor DeWines when he ran, but I support what he's been doing in the last 5 months. I think he's been doing a great job.
Well, I mean, he's got Republicans in the state legislature that don't support him on this. And they chased Amy Acton out.
Which was a shame.
Mm-hmm. So he's kind of jammed up politically because he's got to run. Well, he doesn't have to, but he could run for re-election.
Well, and I always say that I'm kind of the guy that would do the right thing. So it's like, you're going to wear a mask. If you want to vote me out of office, go ahead and vote me out of office type of mentality.
I do that.
And I think that's how I would. And yeah, politics aside, health of the community, because once you get the health back, the community, the economy will start back up. You get the masks on people, it'll curve it. The economy will start going. People will still be able to do what they want to do just by wearing a mask.
It's pretty simple.
Well, you hope it's simple, but then you have people that protest. You got protests. You're more than welcome to protest peacefully. No problems with that. But when you start vandalizing and hurting people, that's not called vandalism, or that's not called protesting.
Well, that's always the case. Whenever there's any type of protest, there's always something that gets out of control. Some people that want to get it out of control, and then people turn against the protesters. But if you remember the footage, most of them were wearing masks when they were marching.
That is correct.
And the violence is, I haven't seen anything lately.
No, I think it's been quiet. I think things are starting to calm down since the George Floyd incident, which that's a huge tragedy on what happened there. And that kind of talks about, now we're at that point where we have social media, we have online media doing all these articles, doing video, and moving forward, it seems that online media will be moving 10 times faster than print media in the future. Now, I could be wrong, but you know this, you're the professional. What do you think the outcome is going to be in the future for online versus print media?
Well, I think it depends on what type of print media you're talking about. If you're talking about a daily newspaper, obviously there's major issues there. If you're talking about a niche publication such as ours, our chances of survival are much greater. But we have to have the online version, which we go with businessjournaldaily.com as our site. So we're posting every day daily news. And as things change, we're posting things quicker, we're posting more things, and the print edition is becoming more of a curated publication where it's more of, this is what happened in the last 2 weeks. These are the important stories. So it's changed the way we look at our print edition as well. So it might be that, for instance, the story about PPP, how many people got it locally and this and that. We posted that online. We broke that story. And we also reran it in the print edition that's coming out this week. So because it's an important story, it's an important story for the record. We're writing that for the record, for the libraries, for the future historians.
And I think that, go ahead. Sorry, Andrea.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's all out there in the universe. I mean, the stuff is out there, what we've posted online, but still, there's that.
And I think that becomes a great thing because it's our history. It's the right facts, the right story, what happened at this time in history that you look at. I mean, I'm out of high school 22 years, but I remember those history books that they've used to have, those like the big old newspaper screenshots of the, I remember that I'm a big history buff here. So I remember reading in the history book and seeing Japan surrenders. And there was a big old snapshot from one of the newspapers. And that's a part of our history. And you can find that by just either Googling it or going to a local Library of Congress or any type of archives that has a universe of that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And it just becomes great. It's a great resource. And I'm glad you guys are doing that.
Well, the old line, journalism is the first draft of history.
I like that. That's a good statement.
Not original with me, guaranteed.
What? That's not original?
Heck no. That's great minds thought of that a long time ago.
Well, and it's funny you say that is that we have a lot of great minds in the past and current, like yourself, that's been doing this for a long time. We have Stan Boney's, the Dave Sesses, the Derek Stars that have been around, but in a different age.
Well, actually, Stan and I worked together, and it was a different age then, too.
And Stan's still doing the news.
Cranking it out.
And he's doing a great job at it. And
he's the Tom Holden of today's era.
Yeah, yes, he is. Yeah, yes, he is. And I do remember Tom Holden. I do remember watching when I was younger and didn't really know of him I just knew by watching. And then as you get older, you kind of see past video clips or archives of certain things, the Tom Holmes Scholarship and some other things that they have. So I'm definitely with you on that. I love history. Here's a funny story. I hate to get off sidetrack, but years ago, I was putting together like my Christmas card list, and I wanted something history, like a very big history card. And I called director of the History Museum down in downtown Youngstown. I said, hey, can I look through your archives for some old postcards just to get an idea so I can scan it, get your rights, and do it? And he gave me the card, and it was an old replica of Idora Park. And it just was marvelous. And it was just one of those history, like I wasn't around when Idora Park was here. But then as I got older, I'm a JFK fan, so I found a picture of JFK in downtown Youngstown, 1961, 63, at a campaign rally on Federal Street.
Would have been 1960.
Yeah. That's why you're smarter than me.
No, I just know that he never came back after he was elected.
Yeah. You, as politicians do.
Through once.
So, but Andrea, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And are you interested in answering a couple questions from a couple of people
Real quick.
So here we go. The first one I'm going to show, it's going to be on your screen here. This question is from Emily. So her question is what is your best memory in your career?
I don't know that I have one.
It's a good question.
Hard to say. There's so many of them. I mean, there are certain stories that stand out more so than memories. Certain stories stand out.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, which stories?
I mentioned at the beginning about I came back to do a documentary on a missing girl. That story has stayed with me all my life, all my career. For years, there was a mafia war underway when I was covering crime at Channel 33. That was all very interesting. The rise and fall of Farmore, all the Jim trafficking stuff. There's been so many.
Well, and actually, that's a lot. If you really think about the history of Youngstown or the Mahoning Valley and what has happened or succeeded over the last 30, 40 years, the mills, the Jim trafficking, the Lordstown, just in general.
Well, that's true in any community. If you go back, and Bill Lawson would tell you this from the History Center. We have a very proud history. The way the community was founded, the way our industry grew, our industry leaders, and even though it was a very paternal type of leadership, but they founded the Youngstown Foundation 100 years ago. So we have had a very interesting industrial and business history and ethnic history and labor history.
And if you ever get time,
the political history, oftentimes, John Russo, the scholar, he will say that, and his wife say, Youngstown story is America's story. And in many ways it is. Now, other communities say their story is America's story, and to them it is as well. But at Youngstown, because it's such a microcosm, the first teachers strike, the first nurses strike, the first police strike, all the labor stuff, all of the amalgamation of the ethnic melting pot, all of that, the culture that's been created here. It's a very interesting town, which is why I stayed.
Well, and you got a lot of news to report back then.
News always have news, always.
Yeah. It brings up the light that you guys at the Business Journal and the past Vindicator have done a tremendous job of just doing what you guys do best. Ethic journalism. And you know what? You're never going to satisfy everyone. You're never going to make 100% of the people happy. You're always going to have Beecham D'Souza writing a piece about XYZ or a businessman, and it is what it is. But that's part of what, like you said earlier, your job is to present the news in the best ethical, getting the point across of what the real reason and what's going on.
A lot of times when people say the news is biased, what they're really talking about is not so much the story itself, that the facts are being biased, that they're being slanted. Facts are facts, and journalists are reporting facts. A lot of times what they're upset about is story selection. And if you were to monitor Fox and then CNN, you would find that Fox is covering things that CNN isn't. They're emphasizing certain stories, story selection. For instance, with the recent protests, they were very heavy on the vandalism and, kept showing the same footage over and over again of fires and things like that. They were very heavy on that aspect of the protest versus another organization that was very heavy on what does this mean? So it's really story selection.
And you guys have done a great job of that over in the past.
Trying. Any other questions?
Not that I have. You've pretty much answered some of them in the past, but I appreciate you taking the time, Andrea. Just to kind of do one last question. So what's the outlook or what's the plans for the Business Journal in the future? If you can kind of give us an insight of what's being planned behind the scenes.
Well, we're going to be reinvigorating our Brain Gain campaign. We're going to be creating some new products around that, getting very much involved with leadership discussions and roundtable discussions. So we're reinvigorating the Brain Gain to look at how do we create a spirit of entrepreneurship, a culture of entrepreneurship. So we're creating our own jobs. And how do we keep our best and brightest here or bring them home? That's really our main thing going forward.
And I appreciate the time that you've taken, Andrea. It's always a pleasure, and I hope you can continue what you're doing with the Business Journal.
Thanks, Tony. We appreciate your work too. You do a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Check out other podcasts at anthonyvspano.com for future episodes. Be safe and God bless.